Last time on Dragon Ball Z, I talked about Elden Stink for about 30 minutes because I hate video games. But this time is different. This time I'm talking about... And this time I'm not alone. Ladies and gentlemen, allow me to introduce Rankest Dweller.
Birmingham.
ULTRAKILL is a first-person character action shooter, being a beautiful blend of first-person shooters like Doom or Quake, and character action games like Devil May Cry or Bayonetta. This video game somehow is the perfect blend of these two genres, and there is truly no other game like it. On a basic level, it's Quake with a style meter. On a more technically advanced level, this game lets you punch your own shotgun shells hard enough to explode. That's one of the most basic tricks you'll be learning from playing the game. The plot is simple. Mankind is dead, blood is fuel for machines like yourself that played a major role in destroying mankind, and hell is quite full. We'll go more in depth into that later. One important thing to note before we get going, the game is currently in early access, so the information in this video will eventually become outdated in the future. Now let's get this going with the Prelude. The first act of ULTRAKILL acts as the perfect introduction to the utter insanity that the rest of the game is. We start out in abandoned factories that were built by humans to extract energy from hell. As per usual, things didn't work as planned, and now everyone is gone. The only things left are hostile damned souls, known as husks, and demons leaking out of hell, and a fellow machine who has just the very same plan you have. The machine in question is fittingly named Sora's Machine, and it acts like a pseudo-rival for 2 of the 5 levels in the Prelude. Anyway, Prelude shows all the important base mechanics to the player: shooting enemies, healing from blood, using explosions for both enemies and environmental traversal, etc. Back to Sora's Machine, we first see him in 0-2 as a little... Whoa, he's just like me! Because you see him killing demons as well. Then, in the next level, you fight him twice. The first time you fight him is a little hectic, since by this point you still only have the revolver, and new players won't exactly know how to utilize the revolver, but as a reward for defeating him, you get a shotgun. The game will then show you that the alternate fire for the shotgun is a grenade that explodes on impact. You want to mainly be using the shotgun in the second encounter against Sora's Machine, since he has a weakness to it, and it's also really good for recovering blood quickly. Oh yeah, I forgot to mention the stand-in enemies. Oh, video invalidated. Oopsies. First up, we have the Filth. These green goobers are basically cannon fodder and only exist to give you health and style. They have one of the lowest health pools and have a single attack, which is a lunge. Next, we have the Stray. These are a step up from Filth, and I would put them on a similar level to Imps from Doom 2. They have a higher health pool than Filth, and have a single attack of being a red projectile that can be parried or easily dodged. Then there's the Schism, which is essentially a better version of a Stray. They have even more health, and fire a spray of red projectiles in a vertical or horizontal arc. Then, for demons, we get the Malicious Face, which will shoot a burst of red projectiles or an instant beam that causes an explosion, and the last normal enemy introduced in Prelude, the Cerberus, which will do a couple different melee attacks and occasionally throw the bullet holes for an explosion. After running through the factory some more, you eventually get to the Gates of Hell, with the famous line, "Abandon hope, all ye who enter here," carved onto them. You look to your left, and you see one of the statues is getting up. This is the final boss of the Prelude, Cerberus. He's pretty easy, has a lot of good tells so the player knows what he's going to do. But once he gets down to half health, the other statue on the right side of the room will wake up, and now there are 2 of them. Once one of them dies, the other gets enraged until you kill it, and once you kill it, the gates will open. They go down the elevator, and so ends the Prelude of ULTRAKILL.
V1's first step into hell proper leads to a very jarring sight. The traditional ideas of a land of brimstone and agony are immediately subverted by what seems to be a relatively quiet and peaceful outdoor environment. If you're not the intelligence of an average Twitter user though, you can quite obviously see that this area isn't outdoors at all. The rooms are quite obviously just rooms, only several metres across with electronic screens on them, merely showing a tranquil outdoors landscape. The water in the areas are likewise just holographic projections, and if one actually tries to locate the source of the very low compressed sounding bird song, all of this overt and cheap falseness is by design, meant to be almost a mockery of a tranquil heaven-like landscape, to serve as punishment not of physical pain, but of longing for the real thing, a real paradise that has been eternally denied. For a good while, this first stage remains free of enemies, and actually introduces the first use of skulls, not counting O2's secret. Skulls work as the keys of ULTRAKILL. You pick them up by using the punch key on them, and carry them to their respective pedestal to open the door of the corresponding colour. 1-1 introduces a new enemy type known as drones, small hovering machines that die pretty easy but can be difficult to hit, sometimes with their small size and sudden strafes. Upon reaching near death, the drones will actually make an attempt to kamikaze V1. This can be dealt with by either killing them so hard they explode immediately, simply just stepping aside from their path, or by politely redirecting them back to their allies. The level also debuts the third weapon of the game, the nail gun. By default, the nail gun you acquire is the blue variant, which comes stocked with a tank of 100 nails that recharge over time, and the ability to shoot up to 3 special magnets, which draw nails toward them and between them, allowing the player to set up nail traps and nail bombs to deal with more mobile and aggressive foes. The second stage of Limbo seems to continue the same spiel as the last, featuring the same tranquil environments, chock full of denizens to sate V1's blood hunger. Progression is blocked off with red and blue doors much like the first level and requires you to do a little bit of exploration to find the skulls for each door. During V1's hunt for a blue skull door, backtracking to the main room will show that something has passed by and torched everything to a crisp, and they've given the environment the same treatment. The street cleaners have finally made their debut. They are basically what happens if you get the average pyro main's brain function and place them in a killer robot with a flamethrower. They will chase the player relentlessly until they are within range, in which they will give V1 a nice dousing of purifying flames, as their original lore purpose was intended for them to help and try and purify the world after humanity clogged the atmosphere of extreme pollution. They can be a very annoying enemy to deal with if left alone, as they are rather spongy for their speed and size, and actually seem to be the only enemy that realises that the fast blue robot is trying to kill it, so they will actually protect themselves by dodging out of the way of non-hit scan projectiles and are able to actually deflect chorus fired from the core eject shotgun. The best way to deal with these threats is to land a revolver shot on their fuel tanks, which is normally a very difficult shot to make except for the fact that they are the target of ricochets from V1's marksman revolver coins. Getting good with this coin will allow you to hard counter any street cleaners as long as you have a coin available to use and good aim. Not much goes on after this dramatic introduction though, and you simply just pass through a few rooms filled with enemies to kill. I will however mention that the fact that when Limbo isn't outdoors, it actually has the theme of a manor or castle, which again is actually accurate to the Inferno depiction, as within Limbo's lush landscape lie the castle, where the damned souls usually reside. This will become very relevant in the next stage. This level is the peak of Limbo's standard enemy encounters, taking place almost entirely within the castle-like interiors I mentioned before. Upon entering the halls of Sacred Remains, you will immediately see a door that has both red and blue skull pedestals in front of it. Only one skull is actually needed in order to open this door. This level, much like all 3 Double Down, is actually fairly open-ended and non-linear in that it presents you with 2 paths to choose from. If you do not seek hardship, stay indoors. It tells you that whatever route takes you outside will be more challenging than the other. So of course I go outside and engage with the enemies. You'll actually notice that the outdoor areas have a deeper orange lighting, meaning dusk is underway. And Limbo's screens at least have the courtesy to simulate a day/night cycle. Upon battling your way through the castle and returning the skull to the door, a new kind of demon makes its first appearance as the level's boss, the Hideous Mass, a tank-like demon who's grown so large that her outer stone shell is cracked apart, showing the flesh inside. This serves as the only part of the demon that can be damaged. The mass will shoot large orange explosive mortar projectiles into the air that must be dodged, as the damage they deal can two-shot a player if they forget about them. When not firing hell mortars at V1, the mass will slam its arms, creating large shockwaves that must be jumped over before following up with a clap that generates a wave perpendicular to the first. As long as you don't allow yourself to be overwhelmed by its barrages and stomps, the fight should go smoothly. Just watch out for the harpoon tail attack, because it can lock you down and end you quickly should it land. The climax of Limbo shows that the fake sun has finally set and put the dimension under night. Clair de Lune, French for moonlight, is the name of this level, and the actual classical music piece by Claude Debussy playing in the background. This level is actually entirely devoid of enemies, and by progressing ahead you'll come across a blue locked door with 3 pedestals for blue skulls. This requires you to actually explore parts of the manor to look for said skulls. A room upstairs and to the right contains a book that details a damned soul expressing anguish at the sheer fakeness of Limbo, and noting the mocking song that plays at all times, meaning that the song Clair de Lune is actually heard by all the souls who dwell in this area of Limbo. The passage then tells us the name of a certain angel that the writer begs for forgiveness of, Gabriel. The headless praying skeleton outside the room shows that it was never given to him. One last thing that the passage mentions are the skulls that are needed to progress. They are said to have been hidden amongst the furnishings, books and very foundations of the area. We shall clue the player as to some of their locations. If one skull has been placed on a pedestal and V1 returns to the main hall to find an encounter, a unique scene plays. V1 is not alone in Claire de Lune, and some sort of red humanoid machine is also running around the area. Once you find the last skull and place it on the door finally opens. By the way, the skull puzzle is actually entirely not needed, and one can simply just shoot the window above the door with a powerful shot or explosion to open it. This greatly pleases people who are probably sick of Limbo's use of skulls on every level in speedrunners. The next room is the stage for your first seriously challenging fight in ULTRAKILL. Crashing through the window, much like the players who actually know about the destructible window themselves, comes V2, a blood-hungry killer machine made almost identically to you. It strafes and dodges and comes armed with a piercer revolver and core eject shotgun. This fight is very tough as it requires you to constantly be on the move and not be hit, much like the hideous mass. The main challenge with V2 is actually trying to consistently land shots on them, as their speed combined with their evasive movements make V2 a very difficult target to get a bead on. If you haven't noticed, V2's wings actually change colour at times, which telegraphs what state the AI is in. V2's AI actually reacts to the player's positioning relative to itself and will change states accordingly. Red wings are shown when the player keeps a distance from V2 and shows V2's intent to close the distance as quickly as possible. Green wings are the opposite and are shown when the player keeps too close to V2, usually for the purpose of healing off of them, and V2 will try to get away from the player as hard as they can. Blue and yellow wings are just neutral states and usually involve keeping to mid-range and strafing while firing at the player. The player can also learn the sound cue unique to each of V2's attack, which are out of 4. Once V2 has been defeated, they will run to the middle of the arena and escape by jumping through the ceiling while losing and giving the player their unique red arm that they, for some reason, didn't use at all during the fight.
After the stunning conclusion of Limbo, we now move on to the Lust Lair. This layer of hell is characterized by its city-like appearance, lots of purple and blue hues, and a lot more verticality in level design. If you look around in the levels, you'll notice that where you're running around is actually extremely high up in the air. This is supposed to keep the denizens of the Lust Lair safe from the harsh winds that are always blowing. We'll get into the story significance of this later. Now for the actual first level of the lair, Bridge Burner. This is the first level in ULTRAKILL to really utilize verticality within the level design, as well as platforming. You'll be climbing up this tall gray room, shooting enemies on the way up, and then you use a bounce pad, and are shown the true look of the Lust Lair. If you look, you can even see the corpse of King Minos in the background. You'll go along this bridge, killing all the demons in the way, and go into a second tower, where there is another vertical platforming section. The level ends with a jump from this tower, straight to the elevator to the next level. In this level, we're introduced to the soldiers. This is essentially a stray with a shotgun arm. They fire off a cluster of red projectiles, with one large one and a few smaller ones, ensuring you can parry the whole thing. These guys have a little more health than strays, but not much. They will punch you if you get too close, so do be wary of that. This level is characterized by the power boxes that must be destroyed in order to progress. There are 3 in each room, and when they're all destroyed, the door will open. Kind of a short one, but a good introduction for soldiers. This level is one of the more dynamic ones in the Lust Lair. There's a larger variety in environments here than in any of the previous levels. One room has you fighting enemies underwater, and one room has you fighting in this nonsensical area with platforms and arena hazards everywhere. What makes this level interesting is towards the end it introduces the Mind Flayers. These are supposed to be the stand-ins for succubi, as they have a female body, which, according to the terminal, is made of plastic. These are supposed to be the kind of enemy that makes you think, oh Christ, I actually gotta try now, as they pose an actual threat. They're pretty tanky, especially for where they're placed in the game, and their attacks do a lot of damage. For one, if they're close enough, they'll try to punch you. The other 2 attacks are ranged, one being a cluster of blue projectiles, and the third being a laser beam that they'll constantly fire while spinning around. They also have a habit of LARPing as Dante and Trickster style and teleport around sometimes, almost always out of sight. They do leave a slight trail behind them though, so you can still find them easily. The level ends with a combat encounter in this room full of water and another encounter with a Mind Flayer. And now we come to the conclusion of the Lust Lair, Court of the Corpse King. The name of this level is a reference to the infamous prog rock album In the Court of the Crimson King. You start in an abandoned train station, and in front of you is a small tram. I always just skip using it, since slide jumping is generally faster. You'll come to a locked door, so you have to go off to the side and go grab this blue skull and put it on this pedestal. After continuing on for a little bit, the lights ahead of you start to flicker and then go out, and then a giant hand comes through the hall and begins attacking you. All the hand's attacks are super easy to dodge, just keep shooting it until it goes away. After dealing with that, you continue on, eventually grabbing a red skull and putting it on this pedestal, and this is where the real fight begins. The corpse of King Minos will rip off the roof of the train station and beginning the boss fight. He doesn't have many attacks, so he's generally a really easy boss. Whenever he tries to punch you, you can parry it and deal massive damage while also stunning him for a second. Do keep in mind his eyes are a weak point in both phases. After a bit, he'll summon a black hole that will slowly follow the player, dealing massive damage if they get caught. After reaching half health, Minos will cover his eyes and they'll explode, revealing the two parasitic worms that are controlling the corpse. They'll shoot blue homing projectiles at you, which can easily be avoided. Once they die, the corpse falls over and the elevator door is revealed to be Minos' mouth. Step inside and enter the final layer of Act 1, Gluttony.
V1 has reached the final layer of Act 1, Infinite Hyperdeath, the Gluttony layer, and is met with a rather gruesome sight. The Gluttony layer appears to take place in a sort of dimension of flesh, eyes, bone, and bodily fluids which are highly acidic to the touch. This level actually has a deliberately odd difficulty pacing, as the first room will pit you against a Mind Flayer as well as a Cerberus, before dropping into an arena containing an actual trio of Cerberus that the player must fight, with two rising at the beginning and the third one animating when one of the first two dies. All of this is followed by the Bone Bridge room, which is a room set in a black void, containing a warped and twisted bridge-like structure of bone. Glory kicks in, and the game will spawn every fodder enemy encountered in order for you to massacre through. The part of the level serves as a kind of victory lap, showing how far the player has come in dishing out death to the lesser husks and machines of hell. An alternate path off to the side exists in this room, but Willis will cover that later on. After clearing this room, it's back to the real challenge, with a room that will spawn various fodder enemies at first, followed by 4 malicious faces at once. Thankfully, the room has plenty of geometry and cover, so you don't become overwhelmed by the faces' hell energy bursts. Once this room is cleared, an acid-filled ramp leads up to the final room, which is sort of a little palace of bone, flooded entirely by acid that drains as you clear each enemy spawn wave that attacks. Once each wave is cleared, the acid will have drained entirely, and the exit elevator will open you taken to the final stage of Gluttony in Act 1. The crescendo layers of each act only contain 2 stages each, as opposed to the usual 4 seen in the others. The player has finally reached the final stage of Act 1, the crescendo, and is met with Gluttony's now familiar gore motif. The following areas of this stage are dedicated only to platforming, however the silence is quickly broken as V1 reaches the top of the first room.
Machine, turn back now. The layers of this palace are not for your kind. Turn back, or you will be crossing the will of God. Your choice is made. As the righteous hand of the Father, I shall rend you apart, and you will become inanimate once more.
Meet Gabriel, the new judge of hell and was angel responsible for the destruction of Minos and his reformed lust layer, and the angel that the damned souls of 1-4 tried to pray to. He attacks by summoning various weapons constructed from holy light, including swords, axes, and spears, and the melee attacks themselves cannot be parried unlike the sword machine. His fight can be tough for those not used to bosses that prefer to rush down V1, however many of his combos end in him throwing his constructed weapon, and they can be parried back at him if you get the timing down. Keeping on the move by sliding and rotating around the arena can nullify most of his chase down attacks, however it still serves the player to learn his moveset, as he only performs around 4 to 5 different attacks which can be learned. Gabriel is also extremely cocky by nature, and will stop occasionally to simply hover and taunt the player, which prevents more opportunities to punish him. After reducing his first life bar to 0, Gabriel will be completely staggered and can be juggled into the air for a lot of damage before he finally regains his balance and becomes enraged. All of his attacks will now be much faster, and a few new ones will be added, such as summoning swords to rotate around him, and then summoning them to surround the player before closing in. A good reaction time and use of iframes is needed to dodge the attack, and before long, V1 finally bests Gabriel. He is evidently not happy about being Heaven's most powerful warrior and still being beaten by a man-made object. The final boss of Act 1 out of 3 has been defeated, and V1 can move to the next act and begin the next layer, Greed.
Now we get to the greed layer, which is by far the most interesting in terms of level design. This is where the game really shows what it is capable of, with the levels being a lot more complex, both in looks and in design. This layer is themed around the desert, with a lot of Egyptian-style architecture and hieroglyphs on the surfaces of walls. We get 2 new enemies introduced with greed, the first of which is the Virtue. This enemy is clearly supposed to resemble a biblically accurate angel, more specifically a seraph. They float in the air, casting beams of holy light as their only attack. However, while it is casting the beam, it will track the player until the last second before it goes off. If you ignore the Virtue for too long, it will go into an enraged state, which just makes its attacks come out a lot faster and make them try to predict where the player is going. A good method for killing them is the standard rail cannon or whiplash followed up with a shotgun projectile boost. This layer also introduces the dual fire power-up, which, as the name implies, will temporarily allow you to dual wield whatever gun you have selected, and it stacks. This level is my favorite in the game by far. When you first exit the elevator, you see the ruins of Big Ben, the Eiffel Tower, and the Statue of Liberty, all crumbling and sinking into the sand. Which is not actually sand, it's liquid gold, because... And in the distance, you can see the only monument left standing is the pyramid, which will become more important in the following levels. This level introduces a new mechanic, along with a new enemy tied into it. The mechanic is sanded enemies. Their blood is turned into sand, so you can't actually heal off of them. The enemy is known as a stalker, and its sole purpose is to annoy you by detonating the bomb on its back, covering any nearby enemy's blood in the sand. When you enter the first main building, there are 2 paths you can take. Both must be taken in order to progress. Each path will get you a skull, which you need to put on a pedestal outside right by the exit. This level also has 2 dual fire power-ups, which you can use for the 2 different combat encounters they are placed at. This level also has a boss fight within it. It goes by the name Syllabus... no. Syphilis... God, no. Sisyphean Insurrectionist. It's a pretty simple fight. It only has a couple of attacks, which are easy enough to avoid, but if you're a pro gamer like me, you can do this. (4-3) is probably the least interesting level in the greed layer, in my opinion, because the whole level is just going through the pyramid. It's still cool, but it doesn't really have the impact that the other levels in this layer do. You run around and light torches to open doors, that's basically it. The last room before the exit is really cool though. It takes place in this big open room with lights that spin around the room almost like a disco ball. The final level of the lair, Clair de Soleil. This level takes place within the giant pyramid we've seen throughout the whole lair, and it has a couple of interesting things besides the main event. If you look through the crack of this door here and use the whiplash to grab the blue skull, the door will open. Then, shoot the water here with the rail cannon and go through this door. Now, you have the saw blade variant for the nail gun. Going back to this room, you get to see these 2 silly guys on the walls. And you get a shortcut from this here bounce pad. Pass the checkpoint, and you see a familiar face. V2. Remember how cool he was the first time he showed up? Crashed through a window and bows to you, like he wants a fair fight. But now, he ain't playing no more. He gets up off his throne, cracks his knuckles, and the fight starts. It's most of the same as the first fight, but he gains a few new attacks. He got a nail gun, which is probably the most annoying thing to avoid from him, and he got the marksman revolver, so occasionally he'll fire off 3 coins. The coins will flash red right before they shoot towards you, but you can actually shoot them back or use your own coins to reflect his own back at him, but he can also shoot yours back at you. Once he loses his first health bar, he'll crash through a wall. This is the first time we get V1's input on the situation with... The second half of the fight takes place on the side of the pyramid, where both V1 and V2 are sliding down it. This phase is much easier, and once you kill him, he's gone for good, as he explodes upon impact with the ground. This is when you normally get the whiplash arm, and so it shows you the basics on how to use it. The secret missions in ULTRAKILL are pretty simple, so I'll run through them pretty quickly, since they don't really impact gameplay that much. The first secret mission is Something Wicked. This is the first time the game tries something truly scary by putting the player in an almost pitch-black set of rooms, and something else is here with you. This thing can be shot if you have good enough reflexes, which will cause it to reset and go away for a little bit. All you have to do is grab the 2 skulls, put them on their pedestal, and leave. The secret mission for Layer 1 is the Witless, which is a simple puzzle level. You have to fill in all the spots on the board, with it introducing more mechanics with each different room. The secret mission for Layer 2 is the weirdest one, with it being a parody of a visual novel using V1 in a schoolgirl uniform. It pretty much just comments on the complexities of life, so it's not that important. This is probably the most interesting of the secret missions, as it is a parody of the Crash Bandicoot games. It gives a third-person camera view, so we actually get to see V1 in-game for the first time. Now you may have noticed that when I talked about the secret missions, there wasn't one for Gluttony. That is because this one is so special, I decided to give it its own section of the video. This is no ordinary secret mission. This is what is known as a Prime Sanctum. To get into this Prime Sanctum, you have to go a little off to the side of this room with all the bridges in 3-1. There, you'll find 2 giant doors with P's all over them. To get these doors to open, you have to get a P rank on every mission in Act 1. Once you do that, you come back here, and now the doors will open to you. You'll then go down an elevator just like every level. Now, you'll go down a giant spinal staircase, which will take a minute, and you'll fall through one of the Gluttony mouth doors. Go past the checkpoint and get ready for a nasty case of carpal tunnel, because these 2 goobers do not mess around. First, we have the Flesh Prison. Kind of a simple fight once you know what to do, but on your first go, you will be sobbing constantly. Flesh Prison only has 4 attacks, and each of them are easy to dodge on their own, but when put together, they are deadly. The prison itself will occasionally spew blue projectiles in a spiral pattern, wrapping around itself 2 times. Easy to dodge, and the projectiles can be parried for a full heal, but that's a little risky since there's so many on the screen at once. The next attack is the Black Hole. This is probably Flesh Prison's most dangerous attack. It will slowly move in on the player, and if it hits, it won't kill you. Instead, it will reduce you to 1 HP and remove your ability to heal for a short time. Then, there's the giant beams of Holy Light. These are also pretty simple to dodge, they just cover a large amount of the arena and do, a little bit of damage. The easiest attack to dodge by far is the tiny beams that the little eyes shoot. Half the time you don't even have to try to dodge these, as their only real purpose is to keep the player moving. Now, the reason Flesh Prison is somewhat annoying is every time the little green bar below his HP bar goes down to nothing, he'll summon around 10 tiny eyes. The next time the green bar runs out, it will absorb all of the remaining eyes to regain health, and summon 10 more eyes. Basically, don't shoot the boss until you've killed all of the eyes, because your damage can't outpace its healing. Once you have defeated the Flesh Prison, we move on to what I think is the best fight in the game so far, Minos Prime. This fight is so cool, I'm gonna let the fight play out first, then explain it.
Free at last. Oh, Gabriel, now dawns thy reckoning, and thy gore shall glisten before the temples of man. Creature of steel, my gratitude upon thee for my freedom. But the crimes thy kind have committed against humanity are not forgotten. And thy punishment is death. Prepare thyself to die.
Forgive me, my children, for I have failed to bring you salvation from this cold, dark world.
And after all of that, I didn't even get a P rank. What a shame. So Minos Prime is like the best fight in the game, and I'm gonna explain why. For one, every single attack he has is telegraphed by a specific audio cue that only plays when he does that attack. For example, when he says,
Judgment!
that means he's gonna teleport to you and do a dropkick attack that causes an AoE. The important thing to know about this attack is that it can be parried, which stops the AoE from happening, does a good amount of damage to Minos, and fully heals you. The main thing to learn from Minos Prime is that parrying matters a lot, so if you get the opportunity to, you should, especially in this fight. He only has a few attacks that can be parried, but it is highly rewarding if you do manage to do it. The serpents can always be parried,
Die!
and
Crush!
can be parried, and
Thy end is now!
can be parried, but only on the last hit. Bear in mind, this is all on the standard difficulty. If you fight on a violent difficulty, it is significantly harder. Now you may have realized that I've been using voice clips from the game rather than just saying it myself. This is because the voice clips are cool. One of the best things about Minos Prime is his voice, which, if you couldn't tell, he is voiced by Stefan Wade, better known as the voice for Caleb in Blood. I think he's a perfect fit for this character, and I'm now starting to realize a trend in the fact that he tends to voice really cool and really ridiculously powerful characters in first-person shooters. I'll talk about Flesh Prison and Minos Prime's importance in the story section of the video. Now, on to the secret bosses.
ULTRAKILL does have a few secret bosses that are usually references to other games and influential YouTubers for Hakita, and I'm going to briefly gloss over each one now. In O2 Double Down, which is normally Sword Machine's first appearance but not one that you can fight, there is a way to fight him early on, and it involves finding a room that normally contains the entrance to OS, something wicked. By the exit there's a vent that can be broken, and by travelling through it you can encounter Sword Machine and defeat him one level earlier than intended. The Cancerous Warden and Very Cancerous Warden can be found in 1-2 of the Burning World. When entering this seemingly dead-end room containing lava, you can break open a wall that will lead you to a hidden dungeon. Exploring this dungeon will bring you to an incredibly tense encounter. I strongly recommend parrying, as this boss's aggression can be overwhelming, and your only good defense is to send his weight right back at him. Breaking your arm and patting yourself on the back, you can leave the dungeon and encounter the actual threat to V1 blocking your exit. The Very Cancerous Warden is rather simple, but can still be a bit annoying since the arena is tiny, and it is the only enemy in the game to shoot at green projectiles, which are both homing much like the blue Mind Flayer ones and explosive like the yellow Cerberus/Hideous Mass ones. Beating him will unlock the room to the second slab, which is needed to unlock the alternate revolver. It should also be noted that this boss is a reference to Civ11, a YouTuber who dedicates his sorry life to playing boomer shooters, which ULTRAKILL has DNA of, being half Quake, half Devil May Cry. In 1-3 Halls of Sacred Remains, you normally only need to get one skull to open the main door. However, if you dedicate yourself to clearing the entire map, you can place both skulls on their respective pedestals, then a painting showing a hidden passage will arise and lead you to a red and blue sword machines called Agony and Tundra. This secret encounter is easily the hardest of the 4 secrets, as this boss fight took a page out of Elden Ring boss design and just throws 2 full aggro enemies upon the player, meaning you have to constantly be on the run to evade their attacks. Upon defeat, the third slab for the alternate revolver will appear. This boss is a reference to the twin demons Agony and Tundra, encountered in Devil May Cry 3, a game that heavily inspired ULTRAKILL. The mysterious Druid Knight and Owl are a secret boss located in 4-3, A Shot in the Dark. They can be located inside the Tomb of Kings, a hidden area accessed by breaking a cracked wall in a hallway. Within the Tomb of Kings lies the sarcophagi of several of Hakita's favourite YouTubers. A single blue skull pedestal lies in the centre of the tomb in front of the central coffin. The blue skull must be borrowed from the Mac McMuscle skeleton and placed on the pedestal to activate the boss. This boss has 4 health points, the most out of any enemy encountered so far. That doesn't mean it's tanky though, it just has a lot of phases it goes through before it dies, much like a man going through a midlife crisis. It only possesses a full auto and fuller auto attack, but both can be quite hard to dodge. This boss is a reference to and voiced by Mandalore Gaming and Shami.
The music in ULTRAKILL is some of the best I had ever heard from a first-person shooter. Like, this is on par with Dusk and Doom Eternal. Every mission in the game has its own individual track, and they're all just so amazing. I'll play some samples here to give you an idea on how the music sounds. Oh, and remember how I said each mission has its own track? Well, actually there's 2 tracks for each level, a calm version for when you're walking around, and the normal version that plays when you're in combat. For example, here's the calm version of Doom Eternal. And here's the normal version used in combat. Cool music, very epic. Go buy the Act 1 soundtrack on Bandcamp and support the development.
If at any point you decide the game's enemy encounters are getting too easy to deal with, the cyber grind is always there to humble you. The cyber grind is this game's equivalent of Devil May Cry's Bloody Palace, as it is an infinite horde mode that gets progressively harder and harder the higher wave you reach. Eventually you'll begin to see boss enemies spawn as common weaker versions, such as swords machines, hideous masses, and even Sisyphean insurrectionists. But that doesn't stop them from being able to fold you should you stop moving for a single moment in this chaotic mode. One very cool thing about the cyber grind is that in between waves the voxel based level will then shift into a new form in order to keep things from going stale in between rounds like the horde mode in other games. The Sandbox is another mode contained in ULTRAKILL that's more meant to be either one or 2 things: a way to hone your skills and practice certain mechanics and combos on various enemy types, or a way to just goof off with a spawner arm and test the very limits of your PC, especially by spamming extra weapon power-ups. The Sandbox map is a reference to Garry's Mod's famous GM Construct map.
Look at this dude.
Alright, this section is going to be kinda long, but kinda not. The story of ULTRAKILL is as follows. The humans on Earth are warring between each other, so they begin building various robots, or as they are called in the game, machines. Eventually, a special type of machine is created, one that runs off of blood. This allows it to repair itself mid-combat, making it extremely efficient. A second model was made, but neither of them ever got past the prototype phase, so only one of each was ever made. This second model swapped out the ability of blood healing for extra durability. At some point, humans found the gates to Hell, so they built factories around it in an attempt to harvest materials and resources from Hell to aid in their wars. This was eventually abandoned, and humanity would be wiped out by the very machines they made. Now, those machines venture into Hell, as their only purpose is to kill, and Hell is currently quite full. Now, at some point, God just disappeared one day, so all of the angels started freaking out. They form a council to try and keep some order, with one of the most dutiful and powerful angels there being Gabriel. In Hell, because God is gone, the denizens of the various layers begin rebelling against their punishments. In the Lust layer, King Minos, the judge of Hell, attempts to bring a better life to his people. They construct buildings high in the sky to avoid the harsh winds of the Lust layer, and people begin having better lives. Eventually, Gabriel sees this and decides to stop it. He confronts Minos, determined to end him for good. Minos doesn't fight Gabriel, and instead tries to reason with him, but Gabriel kills him anyway. What Gabriel didn't realize was that Minos had a prime soul, basically giving him a form without a body because his soul was so powerful it could manifest as its own thing. Gabriel and the other angels responded to this by trapping him in a prison of flesh, and putting that inside of Minos' corpse. Gabriel then put 2 parasitic worms inside the corpse, reanimating it. The corpse would now destroy everything that Minos had worked to create, while he was forced to watch from inside the flesh prison. After this, Gabriel would take Minos' place as the judge of hell. In the greed layer, Sisyphus did something similar to Minos, but in a more violent manner. They would rebel against the angels with a war, only to be struck down by the angels. That's pretty much it, I think. I may be missing some stuff, but that's the majority of it. I imagine more lore will be added in future updates, but that's not here now, so it's not in this video. And there we have it. ULTRAKILL, the video game of video games. I give it a blood donation out of a ULTRAKILL. My favorite part of the game was when the robot said to the angel, "You're ultra done for, kid," and then he shoots him. Only $20 on Steam, go purchase now. Rankest, what did you think?
I paid 15 shillings for this tripe. Best game ever.
Yeah, I agree. End of video. Have a ultra day.